Welcome back to our YouTube channel. As we're going to start with continue with our social and political thought, which today we're looking at Giorgio Agamben, Sovereignty, Bare Life, and the State of Exemption. Now, subsequent videos, you'll see the likes of Michel Foucault, you see the likes of Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, Conscientism, and you'll also come across videos on our channel, such as that of Fanon and then Achimbembe, Nuclear Politics. So, as we go over this, I'll actually urge you to subscribe and then like and leave comments. And then those who've also sent requests on topics we should treat, rest assured, we'll do all that for you. Our learning objectives for today is we will seek to explain Agamben's concept of Homo Sacer Bare Life and then analyze the meaning of state of exemption in politics, applying Agamben's theory to contemporary African and global examples. Um, Agamben, what you see on the screen is a picture of Giorgio Agamben himself, and then two of his book, which is the Homo Sacer series, and then the Sovereignty and Bare Life, which is one of some of his popular, most written or famous books. Agamben himself was born in April 22nd, 1943, in Rome, Italy, and is currently 83 years old as of 2025. He's a philosopher, he's a political theorist, he's a cultural critic, and then he was strongly influenced by Michel Foucault's biopower and biopolitics, and then Carl's and also by Carl Schmitt's Sovereignty and State of what of Exemption. And I've mentioned his famous works that we all have come to use, and those who actually read the book know that it's quite also a fascinating book to also read to give you better understanding of some things. So to put this in perspective for us to understand very well, as Foucault asked about how power shapes life, Agamben asks a shaper questions: what happens when life itself becomes the central concept of politics? The connection over here, as we'll explain more in our subsequent slides, the connection over here is that as Foucault spoke about biopower and then biopolitics, which is how states discipline body and then manage population, Agamben built on this by shifting the focus from regulation to sovereignty and exclusion. So the key point over here is that Agamben is interested not only in how life is managed, but also in how life can be stripped of what rights and what exposed to death. So when you read Homo Sacer, which is the sovereign power and the bare life, which was in 1995, it gives you that illumination. Yes, you realize that in the book he uses an ancient Roman legal figure, which is the Homo Sacer, to show how some people can be excluded from political protection and reduced to what he called bare life. So we're going to look at this going forward. So Homo Sacer and the bare life. So who is the Homo Sacer, or what is the Homo Sacer? What does it mean? The origin of the Homo Sacer is from the Rome origin. So in the ancient Rome law, Homo Sacer was a person who lost legal protection. So anyone could kill them without it counting as murder, but they could not be sacrificed in a religious ritual. So as a figure that is meant to symbolize a life that is outside the law, abandoned, yet exposed to violence. So what do you realize in the Homo Sacer metaphoric nature is that, for example, if you find yourself in a community where you listen to me, you are declared as a Homo Sacer. It means that within the community, nobody can touch you, and you cannot even, looking at the ancient times where sometimes human beings were used for as sacrifice, you cannot even be offered as sacrifice to the gods because you are deemed unworthy. And if be outside the community, if somebody is supposed to even engage in a heinous crime by killing you or committing a crime against you, the person is not seen, or the person is not arrested, or the person will be deemed to be have committed a crime. That's why he says that as a life that is outside the law, abandoned yet exposed to what? To violence. Even though you are abandoned, you are now even exposed to more violence in the sense that whoever does anything to you actually does will not face what? The merit or face the rigorous nature of the law. So that is what for you to understand in that context. So it's the Homo sacer that was used by Agamben as a metaphoric for what modern politics for us to understand. That is why I gave you that example for you to understand over there. So when we talk about the bare life, the bare life. So the bare life versus political life. I'm going to explain this too. The bare life uh, versus political life. So the bare life, which is the same as a naked life or personal life or zoidical what life, that this life is referred to individuals in a society who have no legal protection and representation in public. What you have to know that these individuals are normally considered to be what? Zoe. Because this type of life or form of life is exposed to violence and death. He has no protection and no representation in a political setting. This life is reduced to that of what? Of an animal. So you realize that in Agambe's write-up, um, he says that modern state, which is in Agambe's view, creates a zone where people are reduced to bare life, excluded from rights, but still under control. So the key idea in terms of what politics produce, in terms as in politics produce bare life. That's what he means. The key idea is that politics produce bare life. So Agambe says that politics is not just about laws or governance. It's about deciding who counts as fully human and who can be excluded. So in this way, modern states constantly produce people who are what inside but outside the political what community. So sometimes we may example may be like refugees in a camp. So many refugees, for example, when you take Ghana, we had a Bumbunga, refugee camp. These were people who found themselves in this place who did not even have certain rights and all those things. So they were living under, when you take that of Kenya, for example, the refugee camp that was in Kenya, that banned camp. They live under the UN and then NGO regulation, but without what citizenship or full rights. So they were reduced to what? Bare life. And you realize that even when we had the COVID-19 system, what happened? What we realized was that during COVID-19 lockdown, movements was suspended. People were reduced temporarily to what? To bare life. And then even within that, when you find the apartheid South African system, they passed law excluding what black South Africans from what political rights, whilst exposing them to what to violence. So these are instances in which our attentions are drawn, and we have a lot of examples around us where we feel that we've been reduced to what to bare life, as Agambe points out in this regard. And then when he speaks of biopoliticos, which is political life, the bios, he's saying this is a life that is referred to as what public life, the sweet life, a life that is what governed by the state. This is particularly what like refers to like individuals who live in the society with legal protection and representation. Sometimes within our society, for example, within COVID-19 era, we have states where individuals may, in certain third world countries, where individuals went to the hospital and sometimes there were challenges with beds available for them to even what to sleep on. Also, even some advanced countries had these issues where they had to actually build temporary hospital systems or shelters that packed beds to allow people to be admitted over there. But when, for example, when people go to hospital and they said beds were not available and all those things, people were turned back, just giving medicine and go home. There were people who, when we say we live in the political life, who were politically exposed or we call them more like the higher mind. These were individuals, even within this period, they will go to the same hospital and they'll have beds, not just beds, they'll have rooms that are um fully prepared in the best way, a room that maybe could have even taken more 3 or 4 beds, but will just be reserved only for them. That is what you first about the political life, because these are individuals who are having legal representation. They are able to live in any way. For example, um, in Ghana, uh, when our then formal communication minister, deputy communication minister, George Ando, not as a victim, but just as to use an example, when he was engaged in an accident, you find that there was a medical helicopter that came in to just carry him to the hospital. But in the same way, there have been people within the country, Ghana, who have also experienced certain accidents on the road, but they've never received any medical helicopter descending down to come and carry them to the hospital. Some even have to be carried through what we call public transport, through what we call taxis. Some had to be just taken to the hospital by just good Samaritans on the way for them to go and receive medical care. Those are the lives that he referred to as what bare life. That those people don't have legal representation. Those people are exposed to violence because when they find themselves in those accidents and those things, it is just the citizens that carries them and send them and all those things. So protocol sometimes is not even what it's not even what adhered to, where some of these people can even incur more injuries because some people are trying to help and they may not have that medical training. And before it may even get to the hospital, they may actually falling out. But when it comes to the political life, these people, when engaging, for example, in any accident or any injuries on those things, they are giving the best of treatment. They are giving the finest of it. So when you take, also in just some of African settings, you realize that when African leaders or some political leaders find themselves sick with certain even minute sickness that we may see to be in the context, quote unquote, minute, that Africa has the expertise or that country has the expertise to take care of them. They fly to the likes of the Dubai, the likes of the London, the likes of the United States, the likes of other places to receive medical care. But when the ordinary citizen over there has that same sickness, he's expected to pick a car, go to the community hospital, go to a CHIPS compound, go to a clinic to seek for medical care. So that is what Giorgio Agamben speaks of in terms of what the bare life, the Zoe, and then what the political life. The political life are those with legal recognition, right, and protection. The bare life are stripped of political rights, reduced to survival what only. This is what Giorgio Agamben draws our attention to in terms of bare life and then um, biopolitical, which is what the political life as he speaks of. Going forward, we speak of the state of what exemption, the state of exemption. So, what's the state of exemption? This is a this is a situation where law is suspended by the sovereign in times of crisis. Right? So you realize that normal law is suspended by the sovereign, which is by the state, the president, the government during a crisis. So in this situation, citizens lose some of their rights and freedom, and the state justify their extraordinary powers in the name of what protecting society. Likewise, that we find that in the time of war, too, the state, in the name of protecting its citizens, can suspend law and justify it what in circumstances, all manners of acts that would be normally be considered as what uh, considered within the law. Because when there's war, everything is more like it's justified because the war is used as an example. The war is used as the reason why all those laws are coming in. And then he speaks of the fact that in the times of emergency, human life is reduced to a bare life because the state is given extra legal power and sanctions may come with what laws they make. So human liberty are limited in a state of what emergency. So, for example, during COVID-19 around the world, using Ghana as a case study. When the government locked down Accra and then Greater Kumasi, when you realize that people could not move freely, right? Um, this was a state of what? Exemption, right? Suspended in the name of what? Of health. So people were asked not to move in certain places. People were restricted, and people who could move were given different categories and all those things. So this is what Giorgio Agamben speaks of, or this is what he talks about. But note, this is very important. Agamben makes a claim that traditionally, the state of exemptions were temporary. They end after the crisis. That's what he talks about. Traditionally, a state of exemption will come in to deal with something, and after those things are done, it ends. But Agamben argued that in modern politics, the exemption has become the rule. In other words, government increasingly what governed by what constant emergencies, turning democracies into what sometimes what closer to what dictatorship. He's not saying they are dictators, but like it's more like a mirroring of that and close to what dictatorship. So, for example, you find a military coup in Africa, right, where constitution is suspended. So the ruler justify surrounding powers as what necessary for order. But you realize that in the long run, oh, we are coming in for transition, and then the transition never happens, and it keeps that long. Well, then citizens live in a permanent state of what exemption under military regime. The same way, taking the U.S. also as a case study, where uh, the sad events of 9/11, 9/11, which happened, you realize that the Guantanamo Bay was set up to in terms of to detain certain people. But in all this, after the event had subsided, the facility still existed. Some people were still there, and all those things. That's why Gambia is saying that if it happens, the state of emergency happens, it should go with it when it's done. It should not still remain. So the Patriot Act after the 9/11, which is about mass surveillance, protecting powers given to the state, is still in order. Detention without trial of terrorist suspects is sometimes still happening. So this is what Agamben is referring to or he's talking about. Yeah. Looking at sovereignty and violence, one has to understand this better by saying, like, think of a military coup in Africa. The constitution is suspended overnight. Who decide who is safe and who is a target? That's one question I want you to ponder over as we delve into the next one. Ponder over this. Just give yourself a few seconds and ask yourself, if you're thinking of the military coups in Africa, the constitution is suspended, right? So the constitution is suspended overnight. Who then the question is, who would decide who is safe and who is a target? That's what comes sovereignty and what and violence. So the sovereignty has what the power to decide who lives and who can be killed. So in classical theory, as I told you that Agamben was also influenced by Carl Smith. So in classical political thought, you realize that example like Carl Smith, which wrote about sovereignty. He said that sovereignty means that the sovereign is what the one who decides on the exemption, that who receive the exemption. So for Agamben, sovereignty is what the ultimate power to decide who lives and who can be killed. So for Agamben, sovereignty means that the ultimate power to decide who lives and who can be killed. So realize that in military rules, sometimes when military government comes in and says, "Oh, fine, this person is corrupt. There may not be trials or whatever. Then a state of emergency. No, you have to be killed. This person has to be hanged. This has to be done." So that's what he's talking about. Then who is deciding who has to be killed and who has to live? Because he says that it is not just about legal authority. Sovereignty is not just about legal authority. It's about what life and what death decisions. Because, for example, in the COVID-19, you find that government decided who counts as what essential workers. There were people who were given exemptions to be able to roam over the street freely, to be able to go to work, to be able to move around. Who decide who has those exemptions? So, for example, when you come to Ghana, some traders were given exemption that they are going to trade. The same way when you come, when health workers were given exemption. Some people were given exemption. Other states where you go, you find like certain health workers and certain category of workers were given exemption. So the question is, who determines that essential workers? Who are allowed to move and who have to stay at home? So to Agambe, sovereignty determines who live continues. Like, oh, sorry, who lives continue, whose life is continuing. And then in the normal sense, who is what? Who is restricted? So in terms of the violence and the exclusion, as we are talking about the sovereignty and violence, realize that sovereign power shows itself most clearly in the what? In its ability to what? To isolate groups as exemption. People placed in what? Outside normal law. Because this particular group you're talking about are controlled, but are stripped of what? Full what? Protection. Because when you have refugees in a camp, there is no citizenship, there is no full right, but they are subjected to what? To control. When you take the Guantanamo Bay detainees, when you realize that these are people who are outside the US law, but they could be what, detained indefinitely. Looking at the apartheid South African system, blacks isn't treated as what? As what exemptions and the police control without what? Equal rights. So these are some of the things that Giorgio Agamben points out to. Okay, so we're looking at the coming politics, which is more like the solution Agamben prescribed. So imagine a politics where there are no outsiders, no refugees, no undocumented migrants, no one is excluded. Everyone is recognized simply because they are alive. And the question I want you to ponder over, and then in terms of the description I've given here, is that is this realistic? Is this realistic? Or is it or a utopian? That's one we're about to deal with right now. That this is more like is a solution realistic or an utopian? So the coming politics of that Agamben talks about. So what I want us to look at in terms of the coming politics Agamben talks about is that Agamben talks about is that he's talking about a new politics that is coming, which is called the para, which is called the which he referred to as the euphoria aporia. So the aporia means unresolved what inconsistency in terms of dictatorship and then totalitarianism. So he says that democratic institutions have become what dictators. So to resolve this, Agamben says that a new politics is coming where we are coming to solve the what inconsistency in dictatorship and totalitarianism in what in our liberal what democracy that he talks about. Yeah. So this is the coming politics he talks about, where Agamben suggests a future for what of politics beyond sovereignty and bare life. So moving away from the exclusion and the state of exemption, emphasizing life itself as the foundation of what of politics, not law or state. So he suggests communities not he suggested that a community will be built not based on identity, on citizenship or nationality, but on shared what existence. But so you ask yourself, is this realistic or an utopia? We've been talking about some of these examples over here in terms of the extent of that it's applicable to the African continent. We'll look at the critique of Agamben. As I said, every theory has its own criticisms and there are critique against them. And then there's nothing wrong if you spot and you want to critique a theory. That's one thing you have to put in mind. So the critique we're about to look over here is that the first one, people say that it's too abstract and it's too abstract. Yeah, and pessimistic. So they say it suggests no democratic solution. But people are saying that Agamben's writing is very theoretical because filled with philosophical language. It was hmm, what his critic his critics actually argued against it is that it paints a dark picture of modern politics, as if everyone is always trapped in Homo Sacer, or trapped as Homo Sacer. That's what the critic talks about. And the fact that this kind of it feels like it's too pessimistic, suggesting that democracy offer no real way out. Because the examples that you find the critics coming is like, so if, or the analogy they will say that if we accept Agamben's fully, then we'll ask ourselves that is, for example, South Africa, Ghana, or Nigeria's democratic process, which is election or parliament, might seem even meaningless, because sovereignty can always what suspend right in what rights, or can always suspend rights in crisis. Because it comes this way, you may ask yourself, what's the point of democracy? The state of exemption is permanent, fine. But the question you're going to ask yourself over here is that if Agamben is saying um, this is that politics and democracy is tainted and all those things, then what is the solution? He has no solution. So the second point, which has the vague solutions, like Agamben's hinting on coming politics as a new form of politics beyond sovereignty and bare life. But he never clearly explained what this would look like, or how to achieve it. He only just mentioned a coming politics, because the critics are just saying that he offers diagnosis, all right, with no cure. So that's the flaw, or that's what critics argue against him. So one thing you realize that unlike Fanon, which there's a video already in our channel, who proposed revolutionary violence as a way to reclaim our identity, and Nkrumah, who also proposed African socialism, which also is part of our videos, Agamben gave no clear path forward. That's the issue. So critics say that this makes his work less useful for practical political reforms. Yeah. So these are some of the critiques against Giorgio Agamben. These are some of the critics against Giorgio Agamben. And Agamben redefined politics as a management of life and death, which you've actually gone through, which I know you now understand where he's coming from. And then show that sovereignty operates through the state of exemption, one that liberal democracy may mask totalitarianism, and then his work remained key for analyzing pandemic, refugees, security, and then human rights. Thank you very much for listening to our video. Try and kindly subscribe and then like our video. And also, you can look for other videos under social political theory, which is from uh, Fanon, Foucault, Agamben, actually Mbembe, and also Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and other concepts. Thank you very much.